Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is flourish. And this verb was suggested by the viewer Abdi. Abdi, thank you so much for this suggestion. Now, let's spend a moment and review some of the definitions or the ways that we can use this verb. The first way you might encounter the verb flourish being used means to grow or develop in a healthy or vigorous way, especially due to a favorable environment. So, with this first definition, many times it's used in connection to plants or people. But we'll talk about and see some different examples in just a little bit of things that might allow people to sort of grow and develop in a really successful manner. Related to that is our second definition, and that is to develop rapidly and successfully. This definition can still apply to individuals, but we'll also see many examples of it being used in connection to businesses or business ventures, and the idea of something just really taking off in popularity and therefore becoming successfully profitable. A third way you might encounter the word flourish can mean to be working or just to be at the height of one's career during a specific period. This third definition is still, I think, really connected to that second one. Again, there's this idea of being really successful in whatever it is someone is pursuing. With this third definition, I looked for various examples and seemed like it really was more common in sports and in entertainment, and that might be because that's what is being written about more commonly. But I think you will see it used in that way. A fourth and probably less common way to see flourish used can mean to wave something around in order to attract the attention of others. For now, you should know that flourish is a regular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms flourishing. The past tense and the participle form of our verb can be made by adding ed. Now, the space verb flourish ends in an unvoiced sh sound. This means the ed ending is just going to make a T sound, and we're not going to add an extra syllable to the word when we say it. The past tense and the participle form of our verb should sound like this: flourished, flourished. Okay. Now, we don't have any phrasal verbs that we need to study, so we'll move on and do a little verb tense practice. Today, I thought we could review the simple past tense and the present perfect. Let's start with the simple past tense. We use this verb tense to talk about completed actions that occurred at a known point in the past. Now, sometimes there will be time signals telling us that, but they're not going to be in every sentence in the simple past tense. So instead, that known time can be implied as part of a longer conversation or a longer passage. The nice thing about making sentences in the simple past tense is that our structure to the sentence stays the same no matter what our subject is. So in the affirmative, you'll see a subject, and then you're going to see that ed form of the verb. Let's take a look at an example. The sophisticated civilization flourished for roughly 1,000 years on the edge of the Amazon rainforest. I think this could tie back either really to the first or second definition. So talking about growing and being successful, developing successfully, could apply in this sentence. Now I know this uh, verb tense or this example sentence doesn't have our time signal here, but I again borrowed it from a longer passage describing what researchers had recently discovered regarding this, and they had made an estimate as to the point in time in which this group of people lived and existed. So that's why simple past tense is being used there. Now, if you want to make a negative simple past tense sentence, what you do is start with your subject, use did not, and then the base verb. Please don't use that ed form of the verb here in the negative. Let's look at another example. John didn't flourish in the traditional sense of the academic system. So here we're likely going to hear a bit of a story about someone who maybe struggled in school but was still highly intelligent, but just maybe had some challenges or didn't learn in what is thought of as maybe a traditional way. Now let's take a look at making a yes or no question in the simple past tense. To do this, we want to start with did, then we're going to have our subject, and then the base verb. An example of this. Did his career flourish after appearing in the Marvel movie? So here referring to Marvel Comics, your superheroes, and maybe we're sort of asking, is this person at the height of their career? Is this person extremely successful? And again, likely talking about an actor here. Now let's move on and make some sentences in the present perfect. This verb tense can also be used to talk about actions that occurred in the past. But if we do it, we're generally describing something that occurred at an unknown point or a point where it just doesn't matter. We might call this the indefinite past tense. So that's something that can make simple past tense and present perfect a little confusing. But we can also use it to describe an action that started in the past and continues into the present. You'll notice present perfect has two letter P's in this verb tense, and that can help you remember you'll need two parts to make your verb. This is a verb tense where we need to pay attention to our subject. So if our subject is I, you, we, or they, we'll use have and then our participle form of the verb. But if our subject is he, she, or it, we'll use has and the participle form of the verb. Here's another example. The Market Food Co-op has flourished for over 50 years in this rural area. So here, this would be a good example of we're describing something started in the past. And since this writer has chosen to use present perfect, I would assume it's continuing to operate. And that's what would make it different than the earlier simple past tense example that we looked at here. So whatever civilization is being described in that simple past tense sentence, it does not exist anymore because we have that completed action. Now let's move on and make some sentences in the negative, but in the present perfect. To do this, again, pay attention to your subject. You'll use either have not and then the participle form of the verb, or has not and then the participle. Here's another example. The community gardens haven't flourished this season due to the drought. So here we're back to that first definition. What we're describing here is an unhealthy environment where there's not enough rainfall to allow plants to grow. Now let's look at making a yes or no question in the present perfect. To do this, we're going to start with have or has, then we'll have our subject followed by the participle form of the verb. Here's our last example. Has openness flourished on campus? So here maybe kind of transparency, administration explaining their ideas or their reasons behind certain decisions or policies. That might be the question that's being asked here. Now let's spend a moment looking at some words that are related to our verb flourish. And the first word we're going to look at here is just the noun form of the word. The noun flourish has the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation as our verb. When we use this word as a noun, it can have a number of different meanings. We're going to talk about 4 of them. The first way to use the noun flourish is to talk about some bold or extravagant gesture or action. Again, that's generally made to attract attention of others. So, an example of this in a sentence might be: the actor entered the scene with a flourish. So maybe there's something really over the top about what this character is doing with um, their hands, maybe the way in which they're walking, or sort of how they're announcing. But again, it's meant to grab people's attention. Another way to use the noun flourish is to talk about an instance of suddenly performing or developing in an impressive and or successful way. An example of that might be: with a flourish of goals in the second half, the team came back and won decisively. So here, right, we're talking probably about a football or soccer team suddenly performing really well in the second half of the game, right? So they've scored many goals. A third way to use the noun flourish is very specific to music. And so it's describing kind of fanfare played by brass instruments. An example of this in a sentence could be: the performance started with a flourish of trumpets, right? So kind of loud, focused sound just from that particular instrument. Now, a fourth way the noun flourish gets used is to talk about a sudden burst of something. An example of that: there's been a flourish of activity on our street. Is everything okay down the block? Right? So maybe you've seen some ambulances, police cars, or other emergency traffic when it's normally quite quiet. So this sudden burst of activity is what is being mentioned in this sentence. Now let's move on to another word you might encounter. The word is flourishing. So it looks like our progressive form of the verb, but here we're going to use the word as an adjective. When flourishing gets used as an adjective, we're describing something that is developing rapidly and successfully. So someone might say to you, "Tell me more about your flourishing career." Right? So sounds like maybe this person is getting promoted, being quite successful in taking on more responsibility or producing excellent results. Related to that is the adverb flourishingly. That ly is always going to tell us that we have an adverb. So an example or the meaning of this is we're describing something done in a thriving, prosperous, and or successful way. An example of that in a sentence might be: in the story, every step the creature takes causes plants to grow flourishingly and then wither around its hooves in the blink of an eye. So, again, we're describing the action here of growing in a really successful way. And I believe the sentence is really based on a particular story where something kind of grows and then dies because of the magical powers of this particular creature. Thanks again to Abdi for suggesting today's verb. I thank you all for watching. I hope you have a great day.